And now, see, here's the thing. Right now, what would they give for a 2.0 Raw rating? That's better than they're doing now, right?
I believe
Hello?
so. I
Are
think
you still there?
I don't know what the current ratings are. I'd have to check.
Well, I think they're lucky to do a 2 on SmackDown on Fox, but nevertheless, a 2 back then was more people than a 2 is now. That's one thing. But Raw through, I have here 1996 and most of 1997, because along about September of 97, you can see I stopped at September 29th is the last entry, and I just never put anything down. I was on the creative team for another 2 months, but I was fucking mentally ready to fucking commit mayhem anyway. But I'd kept everything scrupulously up till then. But let's go back to January 1996, and the only thing I'm not sure of, because I don't have the number of viewers, I have the rating. And they have changed because the universe of homes have changed, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any way you can Google machine and find out what a 3.0 rating on USA Network in 1996, how many people that was? How would we find that out?
Let me see what I can find out.
While I go from here. Because in January 96, like I said, when I first got this information and first joined the creative team, Raw was doing, as I'm looking, between a 2.4 and a 3.0. Well, there's a February 19th, a 3.1. There's a 3.6. So somewhere between 2.4 and 3.6 was the range for January, February, and March. And then Wrestlemania season, it usually kicks up a little bit. And I remember specifically that the April shows, the April 8th Raw did a 4.7. And I believe that is a time where we were unopposed for some reason with WCW. And also I remember Yokozuna and Vader were involved in that. I think that's an angle we did where Vader fucking broke Yoko's leg or something. But the point is that was a 4.7. That was an outlier because of no competition. The others are 2.9, 3.1, 3.3, 3.8. There's a 4.1. We're into May now. May was cooking 3.8, 4.1, 3.5, 3.1. And during that period of time, Bret Hart had been the champion and was still on top. The January pay-per-view, the Royal Rumble, was Bret versus The Undertaker and the Royal Rumble, and that did 312,000 buys. And the February In Your House, that was in Louisville. That did 212,900 buys with Bret versus Diesel as the main event. WrestleMania 12, March 31, 1996, did 437,000 buys. That was the Iron Man match between Shawn and Bret. And then the In Your House in April, I believe that's the one that they pulled off Mad Dog Vachon's phony leg, wasn't it? That was Shawn versus Diesel. That was Shawn's first title defense. That did 228,000.
Hey, Jim, it's not exactly what you asked for, and I'll keep looking. But
Okay.
For instance, I have one from 96, just a list of the top cable shows, and a 3.0 would be approximately or just under, but just about 2 million households. Not viewers, but households.
Right. Okay, and the formula, as we've talked about back then, this is prehistory for TV ratings, was what, 1.6 or 1.7 people per household was the way they figured it out. Somewhere around that. So 2 million households was technically around 3 million something people. Not the same thing as today. And anyway, here's where I was going with this. In May 96, remember the In Your House Shawn Michaels British Bulldog match that got knocked off the air from Florence, South Carolina because of the thunderstorm and the power outage?
Of course.
That did 215,000 buys on pay-per-view. How many refunds they gave, I do not know. But then you notice something else. And a lot of people may have overlooked this. But all of a sudden, in June and July, the Raw ratings start to go down. Now we're 2-3, 2-7, 2-3, 2-7, 2-6, 2-5, 2-6, 2-2, 2-1, 2-6, 2-0. That's through August. 2-9. Preempted a couple of weeks for the dog show. 2-4, 2-1. At the same time, the pay-per-view buys seem to be going down. King of the Ring did 204,400 buys with Shawn and Bulldog in the rematch. In Your House in July, 153,300 for Shawn and Sid and Ahmed against Vader and Bulldog and Owen. SummerSlam in August, 207,200 for Shawn and Vader and the Boiler Room match with Taker and Mankind. In Your House, September, 165,200 for Shawn and Mankind. Remember, that was Philly, Mind Games. One of the greatest WWF title matches of all time, but the numbers were going down with Shawn on top. And there was no change in the creative team, me and poor brother Brucey, from the first half of 96 to the second half of 96. There was one major change. We lost Bret Hart, we got Shawn Michaels. And all of a sudden, things started headed south, which is kind of what Bret had in his mind when he dropped the belt to Shawn and went to do Lonesome Dove and took the most of the year off and said, let this guy fucking flop and I'll come back and save it.
The other thing you're starting to see when you look at the ratings is this is right when the NWO happens. So WCW, which had been trending upwards, now it has all the buzz too.
Right. And true. But at the same time, yeah. I'm just telling you, because wait a minute, we're about to see something else. So Survivor Series 96 did 178,800 buys with Shawn versus Sid and Bret versus Austin and Taker versus Mankind. But Shawn Sid was a title match. It was on top. December, In Your House, Bret and Sid. Bret is back, but it does 133,000 buys because it's fucking Sid. Then the Royal Rumble 97. Now remember, Royal Rumble 96 did 312,000 buys with Bret and Taker. Royal Rumble 97 with Shawn and Sid, 229,600. And then Shawn loses his smile a few weeks later, and the In Your House Fatal 4-Way that I mentioned earlier in the program, Bret, Austin, Taker, Vader to determine the new champion, does 154,800. Raw ratings are still doing between 2 and 2.6, except for the March 3rd edition that did a 2.0, and actually the second hour did a 1.9. That's when they started splitting up. Either we went to 2 hours, that's when they started splitting the number. Because that second hour at 1.9 is what really lit Vince up.
How do you think, psyche-wise, Shawn dealt with Survivor Series, that match with Sid, where the entire garden turned on him? And the entire garden was cheering Sid like never before. Everything he did, and they were booing everything Shawn did.
Same way he dealt with every other thing related to his psyche. He took some more pills and tried to figure out some way to make everybody else's life miserable.
All right. So
then, WrestleMania 13 in March of 97. Remember, WrestleMania 96 did 437,000 buys, but because of the late change, Sid and Taker, Bret and Austin double main event did 275,000. And there was also a 6-man with Ahmed and the Legion of Doom against the Nation, and that was in Rosemont, Chicago, so that helped the live house. But then something happens, and some other person has attributed it to being some other person being added to the creative team. But somebody else got added too, because right about that time, the Raw ratings, there's some 2-1s, but there's some 2-3s, and there's some 2-6s and 2-8s, and then by the end of April, there's a 3-3 and a 3-4, and there's a 3-5. And the summertime dropped down in the 2s a little bit because summer does, because of television. but there were still a few threes. But guess what the main events were on the pay-per-views that started to at least pick up a bit from down at 133 and 150. In Your House, April 96, Undertaker versus Mankind and Austin versus Brett, 174,500. In Your House, May 97, Taker Austin, 186,700. June 97, King of the Ring, which unfortunately Taker versus Farouk and Shawn versus Austin was in there, as well as the King of the Ring tournament, 141,000.
How long after they went to monthly pay-per-views is this? That was the year before, or that was this year?
No, they went to monthly in late 95, right? Yeah, because this is 96 and 97. July 97 was, of course, the incredible, 10-man tag team match. They did the 10-man brawl that was recommended in the USA Network survey. The 10-man with Austin, Shamrock, Goldust, and the Legion of Doom against the Hart Foundation in Calgary at the Calgary Stampede International Incident. That only did 166,000 buys on pay-per-view, but goddamn, what a match and what a crowd. And then Undertaker against Brett at SummerSlam in August with Shawn referee was back up 234,000. And obviously Austin versus Owen was underneath that, where Austin's neck was injured. And then as September, the last one that I have recorded here, was the price increase, where they brought the In Your House price up to the regular pay-per-view price, and that for Taker against Shawn and Brett against the Patriot did 155,000. And that was Taker versus Shawn to come back with the Hell in a Cell rematch and debut Kane in October at Bad Blood. And I have that written down, but I don't have the numbers because that's when I zoned out. But also the Raw numbers for August and September, actually September was preempted because of dog show business or whatever the fuck, a couple of weeks, and they did the Friday night's main event thing. But the Raw numbers were back to 2.1, 2.4, 2.3, 2.7, 2.6, 2.5. This is where they settled in. But the pay-per-view numbers picked up a bit with Undertaker on top instead of Austin, or instead of Shawn, similar to what they were with Brett before Shawn. And then the next year, 98, starting with Austin, they'd goddamn blow through the roof. So I never put this together because at the time you're in the middle of it, right? But now with all the hindsight of everything's gone on for the last 25 years, maybe we shouldn't have fucking blistered Kevin Nash so much for being the lowest drawing WWF champion of all time. Because Shawn didn't do a world of good either. And the TV ratings went down despite no change in anything else in the talent roster, no change in the creative team, and no real change in the television program. The ratings went down and the buys went down when Shawn became champion. And when he lost it back, and we featured other people on top of the pay-per-view, numbers went back up. And the TV numbers stabilized, depending on what was going on, as you mentioned, with the NWO over across the street. So,
that's the thing that's always bothered me. And I've always said, Shawn Michaels, you can't ever take anything away from him talent-wise. And I think his return in, 2002, 2003?
Well, yeah, then nostalgia.
Yeah, and then,
plays a big part.
He was a very smart worker in the ring when he wanted to be. And he could also be, go watch that Hogan match. If you ever want to sympathize with Hogan, go watch that match. And imagine being a frail old Hulk Hogan dealing with this whippersnapper Shawn Michaels behaving like this all around him. But even the biography of DX and various things, anything WWE puts out, Shawn Michaels, at the time, he was having great matches, but I don't think fans wanted that Shawn Michaels. And what I mean is, If you go watch Shawn Michaels when he first turned heel, you go watch Shawn Michaels the early days of Raw, before he became a babyface and Vince started gushing about him in a way that no one else was. Women weren't gushing about him the way Vince was. And he became something that people didn't want to see. And at the same time, he was miserable. Self-admittedly, he was on drugs. And there was something about him. I don't think people have ever talked about Shawn having go-away heat with a lot of the audience for a lot of that period of time. But I've always thought it was a very real thing.
Well, he had go-away heat with the boys in the locker room, a lot of them, so I'm sure he had go-away heat with the guys in the audience, and that was the thing. Shawn Michaels was a tremendous in-ring performer, and that was a classic heel gimmick. The sexy boy, the boy toy, the prancing, the dancing, the flipping the hair, the blah, 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 the whole overdone fucking ludicrous outfit. And one of the seamstresses, they were sisters, Julie and Terry. And Terry was wonderful. She was the older one. She was very level-headed. Julie was the one that was in love with Shawn Michaels and she made all those outfits, the cap and the leather chaps and the whole thing. And she would wear to come to do the seamstressing backstage. She'd wear her miniature version of Shawn Michaels' outfit. And I'm like, oh my fucking God. So Terry did all of my stuff. I was afraid Julie'd put itching powder in it because she knew how I felt about Shawn Michaels. But that's the thing is, it was a great heel gimmick. But when Vince wanted to make him a babyface, the boyhood dream, to be the WWF champion, all that, Shawn Michaels was not a nice guy. He was not a friend. He wasn't Mick Foley. The people fell in love with Mick Foley, the person, because they could see what a genuinely wonderful human being he was. And Shawn Michaels was the antithesis of that at that point in time. And the guys didn't like him because he was dancing and doing the fucking hair flipping, and they could tell he was an obnoxious, self-absorbed prick. And they didn't like that the girls still loved him. The girls were screaming for him, and the guys didn't like that. The same thing that happened in Memphis with the Fabs and the rock and roll in Louisiana. Sometimes the guys would turn on them when they got too popular with the girls. But then the guys would still pick them over the fucking heel because, after all, the heels were heels.
But that Sid match. I mean, go back to that Sid match I talked about in Survivor Series.
But then you go to New York and that fucking jaded, obnoxious crowd, and Sid not ever being a hot heel, having no heat because he looked like God. He looked like $1 million. And remember, we watched the match from one of the WCW pay-per-views.
Bash 89, yeah.
Bash 89. Spivey would tag in and they'd chant, "We want Sid." They'd boo him out of the building.
Yeah.
And then Sid would tag in and he could do no wrong because they just wanted to see him do that shit. So that's, again, New York, even the girls liked Sid instead of Shawn. But most places, the guys didn't like Shawn as a babyface. They could tell that he was not a nice person like a Mick Foley, and if they ever met him in person, that would be borne out. And it didn't work as this boyhood. Vince saw the boyhood dream becoming a reality. But a lot of the fans saw this fucking entitled little fucking smartass prick being shoved down their throats.
Well, eventually, I think that's exactly around this period of time. And I think people felt it about Triple H afterwards, but these are like two of the first guys that kind of had that feeling of Vince is shoving them down our throats he thinks much higher of them than we do. And he's not going to give up on this.
Yeah. Well, that's what that was. But there are interesting numbers and surveys from a very interesting time. Take them as you will. But there was no real great business increase in 1997 in the WWF as long as Shawn was champion. And then,
Tyson, Austin, period.
It was Tyson, Austin, WrestleMania 98 that kicked the whole thing off.
Jim, talking about all this, you have to wonder, you think about all the different people involved. You think about Vince, Triple H, Shawn, Pretty Boy, Bret Hart, all the various people involved in this. One name you haven't mentioned is Jose Lothario, and that's probably because while Shawn was out partying and drinking and getting into fights with multiple groups of Marines all at once, all by himself. Jose was looking for the right parts for the car to get Sean to the next town.
You really had to reach on that one, didn't you?
I need to get Jose tied into this.
I was wondering how the fuck Jose Lothario was going to become a mechanic in all of this, and it really never panned out. But I'll tell you one thing. Actually, what Sean should have done was brought Jose to all those bars where he was pissing off all those Marines, because Jose could have knocked you out with that right super sock. Jose Lothario, he could have hit you so hard your kids would be born dizzy and you'd be arrested for WRAF, walking recklessly and attempting to fall. But folks, if you are driving recklessly and attempting to fail, then that's where you need the folks at Rock Auto, because they got a part for anything you're driving. If you're driving a car, they got the parts for it. If you're driving a truck, they got a part for it. If you're driving a nail, they've got you a hammer. They will fix you up in fine fashion, boy. Because the folks at rockauto.com are a family business. They've been serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. And some of those customers are getting sick and tired of waiting for checkout. It's been 20 years. They got other things to do. They need to get finished so they can move along with their lives.
Everyone receives their items on time and promptly from rockauto.com.
Even if it takes 20 years. You can go to rockauto.com right now and shop for the auto and body parts that you need from hundreds of manufacturers. Some of these people are actually licensed and qualified to make these things. They've got everything at rockauto.com, from engine control modules and brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, and even a Framostat cartridge for your new obligator. Have you ever seen those obligacators?
No, that's a new one for me.
The obligator, if you get a new one, you need a Framostat chart, or elsewise you won't be able to put it together. And you can quickly at rockauto.com see all the parts available and choose the brand, specifications, and prices that you prefer, because this is not a brick and mortar store where you have to walk up to the front door and you have to knock. And somebody has to say, "Who is it?" And Harley then starts barking. I should have known not to do that. And then as Harley's barking and the people say, "Who is it?" you give the secret sign. You say 24/7. And then they'll say 365. And then the door opens and you're allowed in. And then they have all the parts at these brick and mortar stores. They have them under black sheets. So you have to get under there and you have to look at them, because they don't want everybody to know they've got them, because they don't have enough of them. They might sell out. Cause a riot.
No, they have plenty of parts and they're available for everyone to see.
No, I'm not talking about rockauto.com.
Oh.
I'm talking about these brick and mortar stores where you have to knock and give the sign and they let you in, and then you got to look at everything under cover of darkness, because they only have a few of these kinds of parts, so they don't have all of them. They're going to probably con you and pass something off as something you need, even if it's not what you need, because that's all they got. And then getting out of it, then you're going to go out in the parking lot and you're going to find out in the parking lot of that brick and mortar store, somebody has come along and stripped your car. And then you got to go back in the store and get all the parts to replace the ones that were stolen. You can go to rockauto.com on your computer and nobody's going to steal a goddamn thing. They can't even get in your house. If while you're on your computer on rockauto.com buying a part for your car or truck, somebody breaks into your house and steals the computer, call the police, because they shouldn't do that. And when you go to rockauto.com for the reliably low prices and all the parts your car will ever need and the amazing selection, then you write JCE in the "How Did You Hear About Us" box so that they know we sent you. And we are completely also absolved of any burglaries that have taken place, because we're cleared. After all, that's somebody else that stole that shit. rockauto.com right now. If you don't need get a part that you don't need, because sooner or later all these fucking things break, and then you're going to need it. So if I were you right now, I'd go to rockauto.com and get about 4 or 5 different parts that still work on your car now, but that would prevent it from working in the future if they go out. And then you'll have them. Just take them, put them in the trunk of your car and take them with you. Because if you've got them in your garage and your car breaks down on Interstate 65 just somewhere outside of Huntsville, then you're not going to be able to goddamn get the part and put it on your... So put all the auto parts in the trunk of your car. You'll have them all together. When your car breaks down, you can fix them. rockauto.com.